Okay, so we're going to go through a few questions on medians of triangles. Here we have a triangle that has vertices G, H, and I. So we can connect those points on our graph to form our triangle. And we want to determine the equation of the median from vertex G. The median is a line in a triangle that goes from a vertex to the midpoint of the opposite side. So if I were to just guess where the midpoint of HI is right now, it's, I don't know, somewhere around here. Oops. Somewhere around here. And so if I connect that midpoint of HI to the opposite vertex G, that line that I've drawn in there in the middle of the triangle is called the median from vertex G. So it would split the side length HI into two equal pieces because the median connects at the midpoint. So we want to determine the equation of that line that is the median. Now, when we determine the equation of a line, we usually determine the equation in the form y equals mx plus b. And when we do that, we need two pieces of information. We need the slope and we need the y-intercept. To calculate the slope, I need 2 points. So I need to know what the coordinates of G are, which I have that information. And I need to know what the coordinates of this midpoint are. And that I don't know yet. So we want to first start with determining the midpoint of the line segment HI. So when we calculate the midpoint, the x-coordinate is the average of the two x-coordinates of the points that we are finding the midpoint of. So we've got -1 and 3. The average, we add them together, divide by 2. The y-coordinates are 8 and -6 from the points H and I. So we add those together and divide by 2. And together this forms the x and the y coordinate of the midpoint. So the midpoint here would be the coordinates 1, 1, which we've got very close to there on our graph here. And in fact, at this point, we might want to just go back and redraw that median in so that we're a little bit more accurate. So our midpoint is at the coordinates 1, 1, and so there's our median line. Okay, so now we have the coordinates of the midpoint and we have the coordinates of point G, so we can calculate the slope from point G to the midpoint that we just calculated. So the slope of GM. So you'll notice I use these subscripts here. So little m is for slope, capital M is for midpoint, and then we can use these subscripts here to denote what we're finding the slope of or what we're finding the midpoint of. So here we're finding the slope of GM. So we calculate that by subtracting the y coordinates. So 1 minus -4 over, and then we subtract the x coordinates, 1 minus -5. And that gives us a slope of 5 over 6. So we now know the slope of the median. So using the slope, and as long as we have at least one point that's on this line, which we do, we have both points G and M. So using the slope and a point, we can determine the equation. So we know that the equation of the median is in the form y equals 5 over 6x plus b, because we've already found the slope of the median. We also know that the median goes through the points 1, 1, and so that's the midpoint, and point G, which is -5, -4. So we can choose either of these 2 points. As long as we're picking a point that we know for sure is on the median, then we'll be able to use that point to solve for what the value of b is in this equation. So let's pick the midpoint, which was 1, 1. So substituting 1 for y and 1 for x. Then we get 1 equals 5 over 6 plus b. And so b would be equal to 1 minus 5 over 6. which is 1 over 6. And so therefore we can say that the equation for this median is y equals 5 over 6x plus 1 over 6. Part B, we're going to determine the length of the median that we just found from vertex G. So again, I'm going to write out the coordinates of the midpoint that we found, which was 1, 1, and point G, which was -5, -4. So if we want to find the length between these 2 points, we know that we can use the length formula. So putting these values into the length formula, we get the square root of, here we're going to subtract the x values, so 1 minus -5, and then square it. Then we add, here we subtract the y values, so 1 minus -4, and we square that. So here, if we simplify, we get the square root of 6 squared plus 5 squared, which is the square root of 36 plus 25. And that gives us the square root of 61, or we can round this to get approximately 7.8.